Hello, I'm Giles Brandreth, and this is the Rosebud podcast, where my special guest today is the British journalist, broadcaster, podcaster, Amol Rajan. Amol, before we begin, and I ask you my first question, which I think you know what it's going to be, it's about your first memory, I need a quick briefing, and it needs to be a quick one. Pretend this is University Challenge, and in a nutshell, in under a minute, explain how I pronounce your name, what is your real name, why are you called Amol? Am I saying that correctly?
Nearly. It's pronounced. Thank you so much for taking an interest. I've got so much to say, but I'll try and keep it to under a minute, even though I've never been on Radio 4's Just a Minute. And I'll do this without hesitation, deviation, or repetition. My name is Amol. If you were in your garden and you saw a mole, you'd say, look, it's a
mole.
Nailed it in one. This has been a nightmare all my life, especially when during my gap year I worked at the Foreign Office. You ring people up and say, hello, it's Amol from the Foreign Office. And they're like, what? What? If you're a spy, why are you telling us? And this was in the year after 9/11, so it got very strange. I had, my late father was Tamil, which is Southeast India. The Tamil, and my mum is from West India, a place called Pune, which is India's 9th biggest city, quite close to Mumbai, or Bombay as I still call it. And the Tamil naming convention is your name is your father's initial, then a dot, then the name that you get given. My father's name was Rajan. I was born V. Amol. But when we came to this country, that didn't make sense, so we had to flip it. It had to become Amol Rajan or Varadarajan. And then when we applied for British passports in 1990, my father split his name into Varada space Rajan. So I went from being V. Amol to being Amol Varadarajan to being Amol Rajan. Did I do that in a minute without hesitation, repetition, or deviation? Ding, ding, ding.
You get the prize. Well done.
I'm good at just a minute.
Yes, indeed.
Is that an audition? That's an audition. I need this in my new career, don't I?
You do. I know the producer. I'll put in a good word for you. All right, Amol, we're going to begin now with my very first question, which is always the same. What, Amol Rajan, is your very first memory?
I think my first memory, because one never knows, but then you tell yourself a story about it, is of the commute from Heathrow Airport in southwest London to Chiswick in southwest London when my family moved to this country when I was 3. I was born in Calcutta, as I still call it, in northeast India, where my late father, my dear departed dad, was posted. In 1986, Mrs. Thatcher very kindly let my family into this country. We could have gone to Grenada in the Caribbean or London, but because he loved the idea of knowledge and an education that might involve great universities, my father and mum chose this country. And I seem to recall at the age of 3, I definitely have an image of this, and it was definitely real, and I can't think of where else it would be. At the age of 3, in that commute from Heathrow to our first house, which was on Thames Village in Chiswick, just off Hartington Road. My dad worked for a bank called UCO Bank, and they provided accommodation. And I looked up, and there on a bridge going from right to left was a Piccadilly line train. And I'm obsessed with trains. And that image of the Piccadilly line going from right to left locates me and my earliest memory in London. It locates me with trains, and it takes me back to a moment of uncontrollable, infinite excitement on thinking of this new life that my family and I were embarked on.
Exciting. Just give us a flavour of that old life. You call it Calcutta, and I've been there, and I can see you coming from Calcutta, because it's quite an old school city where they're not embarrassed about their heritage. Queen Victoria's statue is still admired by many people, and the old government house, probably designed by Lutyens.
Lutyens, yes. Well, the ambassador's residence in Delhi, I think, is a Lutyens. Edward Lutyens, a great architect, I think is a Lutyens. And I would say that, how can I put this? Everything that I know about modern India is less embarrassed about the empire than people in Britain are. My father, for instance, absolutely revered. I mean, the empire's a complicated thing in India because, in the end they pushed it away, and the manner of that departure, the bloody amputation of partition was not a happy period in the lives of, millions of families who became destitute or suffered the most appalling grievance and injury and loss. But Britain did leave extraordinary things behind in India, like a civil service, like the world's biggest train network, which employs, I think it's one of is it possibly the third or fourth biggest employer in the world?
Even more people than the National Health Service, I
Yeah,
believe.
is it? I think it's the Chinese army, then the Indian rail network, and then the House of Lords, possibly.
Then the NHS.
And then the NHS.
Thank you.
But my mum and dad absolutely revered England, and I do mean that as something very specific. I don't mean London or Britain. Britain is a political idea, a union between great nations, but England, which was an idea. Britain, I'd say, is a sort of a political settlement. And my mum and dad were both from extraordinarily poor families, kind of unimaginably poor, really, even to me. My dad was one of 11, son of a temple secretary in southeast India.
What does that mean, a temple secretary?
So his father, in southeast India, a place called 200 miles or so south of Chennai, is a place called Kumbakonam. And Kumbakonam has huge numbers. People will know somewhere called Trivandrum or Tiruchirappalli or Madurai. And these places, or Pondicherry is not far away, they have huge numbers of temples. And temples are a kind of way of life. You know, in our secular age, people sometimes forget that for most people, through most of history, certainly the last 4,000 or 5,000 years, religion has been a way of life. It's a form of community. And my father's father wasn't a priest or a vicar. He didn't take services, but he ran the finances for secretary. And he was extremely poor.
And the faith was what?
Hinduism.
Hinduism.
But Hinduism, and indeed India, I think it's very important not that you would, but not to think of as being, how can I put this, contiguous with the Abrahamic faiths. So Islam, Christianity, and Judaism obviously have spawned extraordinarily different civilizations, but come from a similar place. And they have certain ideas in common and certain ideas that are very, very, very different. One of the ideas they have in common, for instance, is the idea that history is a sort of line with an end point. It's rectilinear, tautological. Hinduism is very, very different. It doesn't see human history as rectilinear or having an endpoint. It much more sees things as circular. And India is very important to understand. It's not really a country. I mean, there is a country called India, which its current Hindu nationalist leaders would like to rename Bharat, which is the Hindu name for it. But India is really a vast civilization, which has about 50 different countries in one. And my dad was from Tamil Nadu, which is a very small c, conservative, ritualistic, shy place, or was in 1945 when he was born, one of 11. My mum is from Pune, which is a completely different universe. Fairer skin, still Hindu, but different cuisine. The staple is wheat, not rice. Different practices, much more liberal, much more good times, different appearance, sharper jawline and nose. Very, very, very different appearance and habits. And I would say, even in the year 2026, a Spanish person and a Slovakian probably have more in common than a Maharashtrian and a Tamil person.
Then how did they meet, and what did their families make of them getting together?
They had an arranged marriage, which worked rather well. My dad was a genius. My mum was one of 13 siblings. My dad was one of 11. My dad was the only one in his 11 siblings that made it overseas. And he was the cleverest person I'll ever meet. He was extraordinarily good at mental arithmetic, and he submitted most of the canon of English literature to his memory. He could do most of it verbatim, and I can do a bit of it, but not as much as him. And my dad had 6 younger sisters. And he had it's pretty ferocious father. And my dad got a first-class degree, and then another one, I think, by the time he was about 20 or 21.
At which university?
It was known as the Cambridge of South India. It was called Kumbakonam College. And my dad wanted very much to pursue a PhD in, I think, physics. It's the trouble when your parents die. You don't get to ask them all these questions. PhD in physics, and I'm afraid he got beaten up pretty badly by his own father, who said he's got to get his younger sisters married. And my dad had...
You say beaten up, literally beaten up?
He got beaten, yeah.
Physically beaten?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolute norm back then. I mean, we're talking early 1960s India. I think it was seen as a rather bumptious idea to pursue your own studies rather than do what was in the interest of the family. So he went up to Delhi, where his older brother was living. He did night classes. He worked extremely hard for many years, earned the money, which he sent back to get his younger sisters married, which is what he did. All 6 younger sisters were married. And in Delhi, he came across his older brother, my late uncle Srinivasan, who said he should really think about getting married. And Srinivasan worked in a city called Pune in West India. And he worked with a very, very, very clever, very, very beautiful, very, very popular girl. And he wrote her a letter which said, "My dear Sunanda, I have mentioned to you that I have a younger brother. He is very handsome, fair of skin," because fairness of skin mattered in 1970s India. Exceptionally clever, and he rides a Yazdi motorcycle. And this short, beautiful letter written in English, this letter was delivered by Indian freight train to Pune, where it reached an ammunition factory where my mum saw it and consented to meet with my father.
She was working in the ammunition factory?
With my uncle. She worked in an ammunition factory with my uncle, and she was an amazing 30-something or late 20s person. They arranged a...
Oh, so she was quite old by...
But Indian standards, exactly.
Yes.
My dad was extraordinarily old. He got married in 77. He was 32.
They liked each other from the start, did they?
I think that they took a shining to each other. I think you're allowed when you walk into... I mean, what an idea. Can you imagine in a room in Pune in 1977, 6 years before I'm born, two people come together. And this is what happens still in India. Hundreds of thousands of people do this every year. You walk into a room and at the other end of that room, I felt a bit like that walking in here today to meet you, Giles. You're going to bump into someone who you're going to wake up to every day for the rest of your life, who you're going to raise a family with. You've got no idea if you're going to like them, no idea if you've got anything in common. Then, here I am. It moves me to tears. It's an amazing idea.
Why did they leave India?
Better life, the glory of education. My father, as I say, was a genius. When he wrote and read an awful lot of English novels, he was obsessed with Shakespeare from a very young age. You imagine rural southeast India, early 1960s, family of 11. One of his sisters actually died falling down a well. Dreadful poverty. When the monsoon season comes, you hoard your resources. You share a blanket between all these siblings. Extraordinarily intense poverty. What were they all doing? They were all reading Shakespeare. And they're all committing Shakespeare to memory. And my dad, who was also interested in Russian history, I've got all these books at home. In fact, after he died a few years ago, my mum and I were thinking about which ones we throw away. He signed them Volga, because he sort of gave himself this nickname after the Russian river. And I've got all these books where my dad, I can't even, it's an amazing thing, speaking what would have been his third or fourth language. Because if you grew up Tamil, you probably speak Malayalam and Telugu. You learn a bit of English at school. 17, 18, 19-year-old young boy from a poor family, one of 11, reading in his fourth language, and he underlined, Giles, he underlined all the references to the UK. So I have these books. They might be he was interested in Thomas Hardy, and I love Thomas Hardy's novels, great novelist, Wessex novelist. He would underline the references to a place called Battersea and Clapham, which my dad till his dying day called Clapham. I don't know why. He called it Clapham. I always try to say to Dad, because we grew up in Tooting, which is two...
But of course he's right, isn't it? Because the PH is
should be Clapham
in phone.
Which, exactly. He also called it the Piccadilly line, and I think it was not very much the Piccadilly line. But no, he had a love of England. He had this very, very romantic idea, which I've certainly imbibed, of an idea of England and of London. And it was, if I'm being honest with you, as I will throughout our wonderful conversation, it was really an idea bound up with great universities and education.
And was England welcoming to him?
Oh, fantastic.
So he arrived. What was he planning? What were he and your mother planning to do when they got to England?
So my mum didn't have a job. My dad worked for a bank called the UCO Bank. UCO Bank was a bit like a commercial bank, and he got a posting. It was a 4-year posting. And UCO Bank put us up in a place called Thames Village in Chiswick. And I have this wonderful image of my mum, obviously coming from a hot country. She spoke a bit of English, but not great English. My dad spoke a bit better. But she came with Indian clothes, and so there's my mum in what was that winter of? Was it Michael Fish in 1988? And there's a sort of hurricane ripping through the west of England. And there's my mum on a bike in a sari. She'd bought some sort of warm, cold weather clothes by then, but my mum came completely inappropriately dressed, and she initially didn't work. When we then moved to South London, my mum was a legendary figure. Became a nursery manager, a nursery teacher, and eventually she left nurseries to work in administration at the Foreign Office. But they wanted to stay. I think briefly in 1990 we got posted back to India, and then we came back. But they wanted to make a better life. They wanted to do what most migrants do. As your recent interviewee John Major said to you and said to me, most people came with hope in their hearts, wanting a better life for their families.
Yeah, and they got a better life for their families.
Oh, they got the dream.
And hope stayed in their hearts. They had no bad experiences at all?
I don't think you would ever come across someone more patriotic. I mean, those people who lie in the mall on sort of the Golden Jubilee, waving flags in Union Jack shirts. You know, although my dad didn't have a Union Jack jumper, I mean, he was more patriotic than those people are for Britain. And he loved India. He was Indian by birth. But it's a very particular kind of love. It's the love of someone who welcomes you into their home and treats you as a guest and says, you've got to contribute, you've got to pay your way, you've got to obey the rules. But if you do that, we'll make a great life for you. And look at what his children have got. I've had this life, to speak for myself, where I went to an amazing school in South London. I went to the world's greatest university and I had 3 incredible years. I worked at the Foreign Office. I've worked at the BBC. I've worked in Fleet Street. I mean, the dream that my parents had has come true.
And all very much English establishment notions. The BBC, Fleet Street, Cambridge University.
And I wonder, because I wanted to be a cricket player, and once I worked out I wasn't quite good enough to do it, I wonder what it is in my psychology that has sort of always grasped for... I mean, I fell in love with newspapers growing up, but I wonder what it is that's sort of why I've had that quite a sort of establishment life in that sense.
Before we get to your life in England, you were born in Calcutta, but can't remember it, I imagine, for the first 3 years. But you've been back since?
I've been back to India many, many, many times. I've actually not been back to Calcutta since 1990. I now have 4 children. I would say that the most shaping experiences that I had, the thing that really formed my character, where, I became me as a adolescent, was from the age of about 11 to 17. Every other year we would go back to India. And we would get the trains, and I'm, as I say, obsessed with trains, and India's trains are just the most magical human creation, amazing. And the train from Chennai, which used to be called Madras, to rural southeast India, where my grandparents lived, was an overnight train. And you'd, in the first class cabin, so you get 3 levels. There's second class where everyone sits. There's first class, and then there's AC. AC are those posh tinted windows where you can see outside, but they can't see in. But me and my brother always wanted first class because Indian trains, they have a slightly different approach to health and safety. And Indian trains, first class, you didn't have a window, you just had bars. And so you could feel the wind coming in. But you would get cabins of 4 where on both sides you could pull down a bunk at the top. And me and my brother would, at nighttime, we'd have our initial meal, settle down, use the slightly ropey toilets on the train, and then we'd go to sleep in the top bunk. And if I was to sort of, if a psychotherapist, or indeed an incredible podcaster like Giles Brandreth, were to root into the sort of origins of my personality right at the bottom of my brainstem, I think they would go back to that 12-year-old boy who'd climbed up to the top bunk of a rickety train, probably only doing 50 or 60 miles an hour, coursing through the night in southeast India. The smell of the metallic smell of the light, which never worked. It would always flicker, sort of in a slightly terrifying way. And then you'd get to a station and you'd hear the same chants. Chai, chai, garam chai, 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 vada, 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 vada. And you just hear these incredible, incredible agents of humanity trying to sell you things coming through, and obviously selling it through the window. And that's when I thought, I want to make something of my life. Life is beautiful. I'm blessed.
Have you ever thought of going back? I mean,
moving back.
Yes, because England is quite a small territory. You could go back and conquer India in the way that you've been conquering.
So I have made a decision based on a lot of thought not to. And that sort of gets into, I don't want to raise the head, but gets into kind of why I've actually left BBC News. I'm at a kind of strange moment and a blessed moment in my life where I've had a lot of fun doing a few different things. But if I'm really honest, having been in the news industry and very exposed to what's going on in this country and thought hard about it for a long time, I can't tell you how much I love my country, by which I mean England. And I mean a very particular thing, which is the idea of England. But I'm very worried about it. I'm very, very worried about the state of things in my country. I think we've got some big, big, big problems that really need addressing. And one of the things that I worry about in that context is whether or not this is the best place for my 4 kids to grow up. My answer is, it is. So, that's the vote of confidence that people might want to hear. But I'd say a very specific thing, which is that my worry is, this is a wonderful country. It's a peaceable country, actually quite low crime, amazing prospects, great, culture and civic institutions and parliamentary democracy and all these things. And I love this country. But I'm not sure that it is still a place where, as was the case 5 or 6 decades ago, history is being made. And I mean something very specific by that, which is that I've been really blessed with the chance to interview huge numbers of icons. And one of the things, if you try and study the story of great careers and success, one of the things you notice is they have extraordinary talent, they have extraordinary good fortune, often in being in the right place at the right time, but they also have this particular knack for being where history is being made. And in the 1960s and 70s, I think you could say that about England. The extraordinary cultural effusion. I mean, you were there, you tell me. The extraordinary cultural effusion, that demographic dividend of the baby boom years, relative peace. Today, and this goes back to your question, today I've spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley. Wouldn't want to live there. Spent a lot of time on the East Coast of America. I've chosen not to live there. Spent a lot of time in continental Europe, Singapore. Poland is going through an economic miracle. India is definitely somewhere where history is being made. India is the young country, 1.4 billion people, adds 1 million workers to the workforce every single month. It's extraordinarily exciting and energetic in a way that Britain at the moment doesn't always feel.
Would you like your children, maybe, to end up in India?
I would like them to experience it and then make up their own mind. Isn't that, I mean, you know better than me because you've got older children. Isn't that in the end what you want as a parent, for them to make good decisions, but for it to be their decision?
Of course.
So I've got a thing. My youngest is 2 and has just started nursery and is very unhappy today, so I'm feeling rather emotionally worn by it. But when she's a bit older and the long haul flights are a bit less perilous, I'd like to go to India frequently and invite my children to fall in love with a civilization that's in their blood.
Let's get back to your story now. You come, you're living in London. This is your first memory. The underground train, I love all that. What sort of a home are you living in, your first proper home? Describe the building, the house, the flat, or wherever it was.
It's the ground floor flat in a non-gated community of small terraced houses next to the River Thames. And every bit of that in a gorgeous part of London called Chiswick. And every bit of that really matters because I have this very, very strong sense of growing up close to the water. And I just have such sepia-tinged memories of the age of 3 to 7 playing outside in this wonderful city called London. You know, people go there who live there now say, oh, it's under the flight path for Heathrow. I don't remember any of that stuff. I remember a wonderful, happy home. I have one older brother and it was wonderful. And we had this sense of discovering England together.
And did you eat English food or Indian food?
I've got to tell you, I ate the best food in the world and it was Indian.
Oh.
My mother... Everyone says that their mum was the best cook in the world, and everyone is wrong except for me, Giles. My mum, I don't know if you call her a Michelin. My mum makes the most extraordinary Tamil food, the most extraordinary Maharashtrian food, Bengali food, and I ate Indian food at home. My dad was a very particular chap. He was very, very particular. He liked his idli sambar, dosa, coconut chutney. I mean, the stuff that was just normal. And women of my mum's generation in India grew up learning those skills in the kitchen. It was absolutely normal for them to cook really quite complicated things. You know, we made yogurt at home where you boil the milk and then you put some old yogurt in and you leave it in the boiler room and it curdles and comes into yogurt. So we had amazing food. It was in a sense quite an Indian upbringing, except in fundamental ways my parents ensured that I became very English. Maybe this is where the love of the establishment comes in, because we just watched a huge number of British sitcoms.
And did you talk in English at home?
Yeah.
Always?
Always in English. I'm a bit ashamed of that, actually, because I'm not...
I mean, can you talk any of the Indian languages?
Bad, very bad Hindi, no Tamil. My German's about as good as my Hindi. I feel kind of ashamed about that, really.
Who was your first friend outside the family?
My best mate at primary school, who I've not seen probably since 1999, God, that's a long time ago now, isn't it, was Matt Wortham. There was a chap called Anthony Wiley, Mitchell Lewis. These are all friends from Hillbrook Primary School, which I went to in the early 1990s. And again, it was a happy, happy time. I had lots of very close, mostly male friends from primary school. And then I fell in love with cricket and it all changed.
And when did you fall in love with cricket and why? Well,
it was June the 2nd, 1993. And I can tell you why. Because a young peroxide blonde Australian called Shane Keith Warne bowled his first ball in Ashes cricket. And I was 10 at the time, and it was not his first ball in Test cricket. He'd been taken for a lot of runs by the Indian Ravi Shastri on his Test debut. But he bowled a ball at Old Trafford against Mike Gatting, the, if I could say, somewhat rotund England batsman. And he bowled this ball, and it became known as the ball of the century. So Shane Warne was a spin bowler, someone who, as they release the ball, tries to uncock their wrist to impart spin. And this ball swerved so vigorously in the air before pitching about the foot outside leg stump. And if you don't understand cricket, don't worry, stay with me because it gets better. And it spun off the wicket, so off the pitch, in the opposite direction. And it bowled, i.e. it took the wicket of Mike Gatting. And my dear father used to watch the 9 o'clock news, as it then was. And I saw this ball in the headlines of the 9 o'clock news, which as a family we were required to watch. And honestly, that ball, I mean, I wrote a history of spin bowling, and this is how it opens. That ball hijacked my childhood, because I then spent 8 years trying to become England's answer to Shane Warne. I got quite good, sadly not quite good enough, but I became absolutely obsessed with leg spin, and I am to this day. I've written a book about it. If anyone wants watching this, if anyone wants a free tutorial on any social media platform about how to bowl an off break, a leg break, a googly, a top spinner, a flipper, the Rajan mystery ball, I can bowl all of them. I'm obsessed with it. And bowling a leg break, which is just about the most weird and unnatural thing to do. If you picked up a pebble and you were going to throw it across the river, you would throw it usually round arm. It's very unnatural to do it with a straight arm coming over your shoulder. Then to decide to spin the ball, okay, spin the pebble. Okay, this is really weird. You're going to kind of cock your wrist. This is starting to hurt. And uncock it. That is the weirdest, most unnatural action in all sport. And yet, Shane Warne's ball of the century, June 1993, was the summit of all sporting achievement. All sporting history up until that moment was but a prelude until that moment. And all sporting history subsequently has been a mere postscript. Nothing any human will ever do will be more beautiful than that ball. And I tried for 8 years to recreate it with limited success.
Do you feel your life has consequently been a failure?
Yes. I feel completely that my career, and I really mean this, I know you say it with a twinkle in your eye for which you're famous, my entire career is a product of failure. And I say that with humility. I feel a profound sense of failure. I feel a profound sense of not inadequacy in the sense, I'm not crying. I'm a very happy guy.
The magic of cricket to lay people. I remember one of the most remarkable guests we've had on Rosebud was Sir Vivian Richards.
I know, I heard the episode.
Who, for me, it was like meeting Nelson Mandela. There was something...
What did he say about meeting me today, Giles?
Well, I met Archbishop Desmond Tutu. You're more like Archbishop Tutu.
Desmond Tutu, yes.
Because there's lots more laughs with you as there was with Archbishop Tutu, whereas, you know, Nelson could be quite serious.
He was quite serious. We had a lot to be serious about.
Yeah.
The magic of cricket.
What is it to a layperson? Why do people like you? Why does it just keep them going, drive them through, keep them, we mentioned John Major already, when he wants peace, when he ceased to be Prime Minister, where did he go? He went to the Oval. Straight to the Oval. And that was release, security, freedom. What is it about cricket?
I'm going to have to give you I can't say I'll do this in a minute, but I'm going to give you a quick answer on 3 levels. There's the aesthetic, there's the intellectual, and there's the historic. Aesthetically, nothing could be more beautiful than the sight of a tiny 5.5 ounce red cherry being hurled down at a piece of willow, which is both a form of defence and a form of attack. You've got to use the willow to defend what is yours, which is your wicket, which is the other bit of wood behind you. And you've got to attack that damn ball and send it as far away as possible. And there's an incredible thing. Stephen Fry is very, very eloquent on this. There's an incredible thing. When you go to the cricket, there's an extraordinary incongruity between the hush, the ghostly hush. You see these ghostly figures on the pitch, and there's total silence in the crowd. Day 1 at Lord's, which is, again, the summit of civilization, total silence. And then, if you zoomed in with your ears to the ball and to the bat, there's this sort of grasping, rasping sound. There's the unbelievable violence of auditory violence up close. So visually and in terms of auditory kind of violence, cricket is just better to look at than anything else. Secondly, intellectually, cricket is more a game of strategy and calculation than any other physical sport. Any other sport except for chess, and I think chess is a sport. It's extraordinarily demanding on the brain. There's more to tactics and strategy than in any other sport because you have to think people out. And at its summit, it Test cricket, which is over 5 days. It's a bigger test of the intellect and of the courage of individuals because, I mean, it's literally called a test because it's so demanding. So cricket tests humanity in a way that other sports don't. Other sports are very demanding, but a 5-day test is this kind of epic drama. That's why so many Indians love it, because of the epic nature of Hindu texts like the Bhagavad Gita or the Ramayana. And then the other thing about cricket, which gives it its ultimate meaning, is that cricket, more than any other sport, is history by other means. Because the story of cricket is a story of imperial inversions, where the English go and teach these uppity colonials this little eccentric weird sport with all these weird rules, and the colonials get really good at it, and then they humiliate the English. And they often do it by specialising in something. So Indians had spin bowling, and they were very good batsmen. West Indies had fast bowling. Australians just played harder. And that story, which is the story of centuries of history and politics and humanity by other means, makes cricket and cricketing contests kind of pregnant with meaning.
So cricket was for 8 years central to your life.
Yeah. I wanted to play for England. I wanted to be the best.
And how far did you get?
I was selected for Surrey under 17. I had a trial for them. Selected for Surrey under 17. I went to a load of wonderful training sessions at the Ken Barrington Centre at the Oval, and then I had this incredible moment in my life when I was 17. My skin was covered in really horrible patches. And I developed a form of skin condition called psoriasis or eczema, which is really important for people listening today to know. I'm now completely eczema and psoriasis free. It happens to a lot of people with South Asian background who are going through
adolescence, isn't it?
Adolescence, yeah, it happens very common. But two things happen at the same time. The first is that my body, my knees, my elbows, bits of my face were covered in essentially fish scales, kind of purple, oozing, horrible things. I got very, very self-conscious about it. And at the same time, I got a bit of an elbow injury, which is the excuse I used. Really, I wasn't good enough. And I got dropped by Surrey under 17. And my world collapsed. I went upstairs at the Ken Barrington Centre and I cried my eyes out. And I remember I was so upset. I don't want to over-medicalise it and sort of talk about depression. It wasn't that. I was just really upset. But my dad, one of his heroes, and one of my heroes, is a philosopher called Bertrand Russell, and he wrote a book called The Conquest of Happiness. So anyway, I then read The Conquest of Happiness, decided to get quite academic, applied to Cambridge, and then that changed my life, and it's made my life absolutely incredible. Single best thing that happened to me.
How about girls?
Not very successful.
Well, and you painted this picture of you with psoriasis. That might have made you physically not attractive for a while.
Physically not attractive, probably for a few months. I was also a very rotund. The generosity of my boyhood girth knew very little bounds.
Does that not affect your cricket?
Cricket is the other thing I didn't say about cricket is you can play it when quite fat, which worked for me. I was not very successful with girls.
I mean, can you remember the first girl you had a crush on?
Oh God, yes. Who was that? I had crushes on so many girls. I mean, at school. That's the thing about being a teenager. Everyone's a crush, it's a constant crush. I couldn't actually say who the first crush was. I can remember the sort of first famous people I used to have a crush on. I don't know about the first person at school.
Who was the first famous person then, to give a flavour of your tastes?
Rachel Stevens from S Club 7.
Well, why not? I can arrange a meeting.
Rachel Stevens from S Club 7 was she doesn't know this, and if she watches this, it'd be so mortifying because, she was a huge, huge, huge teenage crush of mine. I mean, she was just, can I say this? She just struck me as the most insanely beautiful person in the world. And she could sing, and I was 15 or something. So I don't think it wasn't a complicated Freudian experience. It was a straightforward crush.
Sounds quite natural.
It sounds quite natural.
Quite human.
I think I had a huge crush on Rachel Stevens of S Club 7. Probably still do. I should get in touch with her and just say...
We can set this up.
We can set this...
No. It'll be our Valentine's special next year.
I'd be so embarrassed. I could not be described by anyone as successful with the girls for many reasons. One is I was quite self-conscious. I've never thought of myself as a particularly good-looking guy, but I didn't sort of walk about with tremendous confidence. And one of the things that I think about a lot with my children is, where does confidence come from? Where do you instill it? Obviously I've got incredible personality, Giles, as I'm sure anyone who meets me would think. But I was away with the fairies. I was dreaming of cricket and committing a lot of Shakespeare to memory. and I was pretty fat, and I was covered in scales for about 6 months. This does not bode well for someone who kind of approaches.
Do you remember the first girl you held hands with?
No.
What was your first proper relationship? What did you bring to it, and what did you get out of it?
My first proper relationship, proper relationship, was with my wife, who's my first proper girlfriend. And what I brought to it was...
She's called Charlotte?
Yes.
And you met her at university?
Met her at university, yeah. Properly got together after university, thank goodness, because we were very different at university. What I brought to it was being very different to her. And I think that there is a tremendous value in trying to acknowledge, keep and retain difference in a relationship. My wife and I couldn't be more different. She's from Devon, she's English, she's introvert, whereas I, as you know, I'm extremely shy. And I, you know, we're just opposites, absolute opposites. And I think that works actually. And I think it's an interesting thing seeing it play out in our children because they have two very, very... My mum and dad were opposites. My mum extrovert, my dad introvert.
Do you have disagreements? Do you have rows?
Rarely. I'm quite non-confrontational. I sort of just go quiet.
Have you ever made her cry?
Oh, I'm sure. She's made me cry. Yes.
When has she made you cry?
When she's told me the truth about something that I haven't done well enough. Because it's the truth that hurts.
Can you give me an example of that?
Oh, I like to think that... So for all, you know, if you Googled me or you had some sense of who you might think Amol Rajan is, or you looked at my weird Wikipedia page, you would think you had a sense of someone who was very driven and ambitious and had achieved a few high status jobs. You wouldn't have any sense that what really drives me, what really motivates me, and what I give by, 90 to 10%, what I give most thought to is what I call the inner life, the interior life, the domestic life, my family, basically, my moral career rather than my material career. And I have a sort of self-narrative about trying to be the best dad in the world, trying to be the best husband in the world, son, and all the rest of it. And if I ever stop short of that, partly because I'm at particular times giving too much attention to other things. Now, it's not too often, but it does happen. There are weeks when you have to be away. There's a lot of strain. No one understands that better than my wife. And I don't think that she doesn't ever set out to hurt me. I think we've got a great relationship and a great marriage. But when she says it, it hurts more because it comes from a deeper sort of place. So I think...
So would you cry in front of her, or would that be...
Oh, yes, absolutely, yeah. And by the way, I've cried most in my life when my dear dad died, and I cried mostly in front of her. So I've cried more, but she doesn't, I don't think she makes me cry that often, but it'll be when we're talking about the stress. Listen, it's not easy, as you know very well, when you've got two working parents and 4 kids, extreme insomnia, which I've had recently, and you go through grief, you've got a lot of other things going on. It's tough. I mean, I've got an extraordinarily blessed and happy life. I'm a really happy guy. I've really worked out, I think, not in an arrogant way, I just think I've worked out the meaning of life and I'm trying to pay it forward. But I do cry a bit, and there are strains. And on your specific question about when she would make me cry, it'd be when she points out where I've fallen short of the standards that we set each other.
We'll come back, if we may, to the grief and the insomnia. Let's now go back to the glory days. You get to Cambridge, Downing College. You're clearly a clever clogs.
Not really.
Yeah, you are. You read English?
I had a good time doing English, but truth be told, I would have preferred to study one of many, many other subjects. Philosophy is my first love. History. There was a course back then called Social and Political Science, and I basically did all the reading. History, I did all the reading for these other things, and then ended up sitting exams in English. And I do love English. I love Shakespeare, and I love Milton, and I'd happily recite vast tracts of both. But I didn't love medieval literature. I love Victorian novels. I don't love modern American literature.
Did you do other things? Did you do the Amateur Dramatic Club? Did you play cricket for Cambridge?
I didn't play cricket. No, by that stage I'd given up on cricket because I was feeling so depressed about not being Shane Warne. No, I did journalism. So I edited Varsity, which is the great.
Of course.
And it's a funny thing to think
University newspaper.
University newspaper, and it's a funny thing to think that Jeremy Paxman in a previous era was the editor of Varsity, and I had a great time. But how bonkers that I decided in 2004-05 that what I should do is spend time in newspapers. Why didn't I see that 20 years hence, these wonderful institutions would be in a state of near collapse, and what I should instead do would be to learn about this nascent field called artificial intelligence. That's what I should have seen coming, you know? That's what I should have seen. So it's rather eccentric if I think about it now that I spent so much time in newspapers, given how little I read them now.
We're going to touch on this change of life that's now happening, the reason that actually we're here. But just take me through the high spots of your remarkable career, because you began, I mean, you did Cambridge, and then what were we going to do afterwards? You emerge having got your...
I think a lot of journalists are generalists, and I had this vague idea that I'd like to work in newspapers. I actually spent 2 years working on a Channel 5 show called The Right Stuff. Have you been on The Right Stuff? Back in the day. I was the chap in the audience with a microphone and a black T-shirt on The Right Stuff. Can you believe that? Yeah. Because in 2005, and there's a lesson in this, kids, in 2005, Tony Blair was going for his third election, and this was May 2005, so just before my finals. And I was in, rather than studying for my finals, I was in the varsity offices, and a producer of a TV program called up, and I answered it, and they said that they were looking for a student to take part in a Channel 5 program, and I was quite dismissive, but I said, okay, what's it about? Send us an email. And then they said, no, seriously, we really, really want this guy called, I think, if he's still around, and if you're listening to this, Tony, please get in touch. I think it was a chap called Tony Lee from Flame TV. And I came down to Clapham, or as my dad would call it, Clapham South, and I met Tony Lee, and he said, Tony Blair is doing a day with Channel 5 through the morning. He's going to be on a program called The Right Stuff in the morning, and in the evening, he's going to be on a show called Talk to the Prime Minister, where he's going to meet 15 ordinary people. And this footage exists. I can get it for you if you want. Of me, I was the 14th of 15 people. I was so, I'm not going to swear, I was so full of nonsense. I was so up myself. I talk like this. I mean, I'm wearing a Fred Perry jacket, and I gave him a hard time about single faith schools, because this was shortly after the Burnley and Oldham riots. Anyway, so I was on Channel 5 with Tony Blair, and I went back and we watched it that evening, and I was a bit of a famous person in Cambridge. It was wonderful. And off the back of that, I got an audition after I graduated, out of nowhere. Got an email saying, would you like to do a screen test to be the mic boy on The Right Stuff? And I did that job for 2 years with Matthew Wright, one of the best journalists I've ever come across. Amazing human being, fantastic journalist. And then Simon Kellner, the legendary and visionary editor of The Independent, came on The Right Stuff as a guest. And in the ad break, I went up to him and asked him for a job.
That's the way to do it.
And as Simon Kellner walked out of the Whiteley's building in Queensway in West London, I did something that I've done 3 times in my life, which I strongly recommend to shy young people, which is he said in the ad break, give me your email address, whatever. And I thought, oh God, is he taking my email address? Maybe he'll forget it on a piece or lose a scrap of paper. I physically put myself in, I'm actually quite shy, in the way of Simon Kellner, so that he had to walk past me to get out of Whiteley's. And as he walked out, he said, make sure you email me. And that second confirmation meant that I did email him, had an interview with Independent senior people. And in August 2007, I started working for The Independent.
And quite soon after, you ended up as the editor.
And I was 29. I was on a stag do, which I'd organised in Barcelona. Got the call. I mean, I knew it was coming by that stage, but happy days, and got married a month later. It was absolutely amazing. 2013, it was a summer. I know you're a big fan of Daft Punk, Giles. If you remember Daft Punk's Get Lucky, that summer that it was playing all the time everywhere, that was a summer that I got lucky.
Well, you've had a lucky life.
So blessed.
So blessed in so many ways. I mean, because then we get on to, well, where you are now at the Today programme until September, when that ends. But also you're doing a University Challenge, succeeding Bamber Gascoigne, who I think you met. I knew him reasonably well many years ago.
What was he like?
Delightful.
Was he like he came across urbane, witty, kind?
He was urbane. He was, in a sense, quite shy as well, actually, very knowledgeable. He had the advantage of being very tall, and therefore he looked slightly down at the world. I felt he certainly looked down at me with some reason. And then, of course, Jeremy Paxman, and now you. So all of that, this is glory time, which we can't go into any detail, because the gear has changed. And I assume the gear has changed partly because of the death of your father.
Yes.
Tell us about your father, who's clearly the hero of your life, the genius that you clearly have, because you've done all these things so brilliantly, and you clearly, just listening to you are brilliant. You give your father credit for that. Why did he die? How old was he when he died? How was your mother coping? What happened to you?
So my dad was 76. He was an infuriating man in the sense that he didn't like medical intervention. And he had type 2 diabetes. And what I would say to anyone listening now is that if you're of South Asian origin or you're black, your chances of getting type 2 diabetes are very high, even if you're fit. And you don't want to get it. Type 2 diabetes, so type 1 is the one you're born with, type 2 is one that is a sort of lifestyle thing if you're overweight and unfit. And so as I sit here before you today, I'm probably the fittest I've been for 25 years, and I'm very determined not to get type 2 diabetes, and I've become a bit of a bore when it comes to the old longevity lark. I want to live for a long time. I want to look and sound like you when I'm in my late 60s. And my dear dad developed pneumonia, and we had a really hellish 5 weeks. The May before, so May 2021, I'd started working on the Today programme. And by the way, I just want to say something very specific here, which is that whenever I talk about any of the challenges I've had, I'm genuinely not whinging. I'm the happiest, luckiest person you've ever met. I really don't like that kind of quotidian victimhood Olympics that you often hear on not just podcasts, but in our culture. I'm not complaining at all. I'm very, very lucky. But I did develop quite severe insomnia around the Today programme. Not because I was worried about doing the programme, I just couldn't get to sleep beforehand. And the combination of that, and we just had our third child, which is, a newborn is intense, especially when you've got 2 other kids at home. And then my dad was in hospital for really nightmarish 5 weeks. It was hell. It was the worst thing you could go through in if you're me. And he was getting better and getting better, but he kept developing infections. And I was on my way to interviewing Ian McKellen, who's an extraordinary human being, for this series that I did. And I remember coming down, people know North London, I'll never forget, because I now think of it every single time, coming down the bottom of a road called Liverpool Road in Islington. You turn right past a station called Angel. As you turn right, you see Angel in front of you. And at that moment, I got a withheld call. And if your relative is in hospital, having been there for 5 weeks, you don't want to get a call from a withheld number. And the lovely nurse said, please come immediately, he's not responding. Please come immediately, he's not responding. And I said, what does that mean? She said, please come immediately, he's not responding. And I ran down there, my mum was already in, my brother, knowing him, he was always late. We went in, we had a little chat with him, and they said that he passed away, he had a cardiac arrest. And going in there to see my dad, it was a beautiful, clear day. There was a plane kind of, going a bit like that Piccadilly line from right to left, which we sort of thought was possibly his last image. And he lay there, and you must have tended to people dying, Giles. They look like they're just asleep. They just look like they're asleep. And he looked like he was asleep. We said goodbye. And it was by a very, very long way the biggest and worst thing that I've ever been through. And there was this strange arithmetic, which my dad would have appreciated. He was 76, I was 38. I suddenly felt like I was being yanked into the second half of life. And really, until that moment, I was a child. Because really, until that moment, I was defined by his fathering of me, even though I didn't see him all the time. And, we had a great relationship, but that completely changed me.
What would you have said to him? You said a moment ago it was the worst thing about it was not being able to say goodbye. What would you have said when saying goodbye that you hadn't already said, that he didn't already know?
I think I'd have said thank you again. And my big thing is that I would have said I'll justify all the sacrifices you made. That's another way of saying it. The Japanese people would probably say, I will honour you. And I'd have said, I'll look after Mum, which I will and do. I certainly don't have, and it's an incredibly important point for people to understand, I certainly don't have the feeling that there was a huge amount unsaid. And can I tell you a very particular and strange reason for that? So during COVID, I went for a walk with my dad, which I did not thinking he was going to die because he seemed in good health at the time. But I've always wanted to sort of prepare for that moment by, saying, thank you, Dad, being very emotionally open with him. He's quite a closed guy, shy, kind of Indian guy. Possibly depressed, possibly neurodiverse, I've got no idea. But I tried to sort of register with him emotionally by saying, do you feel, Dad, that you're sacrifices were justified when you and Mum came. And he just couldn't engage on that level emotionally. And do you know what he said? He said, of course, because look, those people that I joined the bank with who stayed in India, their daughters, they didn't even go to university. And he understood his life's achievement entirely through the fact that I went to Cambridge. And my brother actually went and did a doctorate at Cambridge 10 years later, after me, though my brother's older than me. And so the fact that he came to this country and his 2 children went at different stages to Cambridge University, and I got married in Cambridge. I got married in the Guildhall, and then we had a big dinner at King's College. That meant the world to him. And though we didn't register on the same level emotionally, I do feel I'd kind of prepared for his death in that way. And the one thing I would say to every single person listening to this who has a relative who's aging is you don't want to think about it, but they are going to die. And if they're in their, sorry to say this, but if they're in their mid-70s, they are by definition really quite ill, because old age is the star in the solar system of illnesses. All these other illnesses sort of orbit old age, and you want to prepare for their death. And if you told yourself you've got 5 minutes or 10 minutes with them or 10 days, what would you do? And whatever it is that you would do, just do that tomorrow. Get on with it and do it, because by preparing for that death, you can make it less painful. And it is so, so, so painful.
We both know, because we both love Shakespeare, that all that lives must die, passing through nature to eternity. It's what happens. It's a line from Hamlet, and Hamlet is all about a young man who can't cope with the death of his father. And it really throws, there's so many stories of people being completely thrown by it. You have decided since your father died to change your life radically.
Totally.
Now, as an outsider looking at you, you've achieved lots of things, but they could be things that, in terms of what your father valued, he got you into Cambridge, just as my father got me into Oxford. And then, in my head, I thought, well, to be honest, newspapers, they're fine, but you're reporting. Television, it's fine, but you're just entertaining. Radio is fine, but other people are doing it. I'm not the Prime Minister. I'm not the Minister making the decision. I'm just trying to ask questions. And you think, actually, I want to do something with my life. Is that part and parcel about why you've changed your course?
And by the way, I have the utmost, I didn't know that was obviously the provenance of your decision, but I have the utmost respect for, and I sympathise with that sense that you have. I mean, maybe it's a separate podcast, but I'm rather down on the practice of journalism, if not the idea. Can I just say one thing about Hamlet? Because it maybe, it's part inspiration for a podcast called Rosebud. I'd be interested to know, genuinely, I'm not trying to interview you, but I'm interested to know what you think he means by Rosebud when he says Rosebud in Citizen Kane.
In Citizen Kane? Later he dismisses it as a cliche that he's embarrassed about. But at the time, he is simply giving you the moment that really mattered, the one moment of security, his childhood, the last time he saw his mother. That's what it's about.
Yes, but isn't it also the only thing that you can remember accurately with certainty? In other words, Rosebud is written on this sled, and it's there, it's the words. Everything else is impressionistic.
Yep.
A bit like me with the Piccadilly line train, which is maybe why you start with that. It's impressionistic. It's like very broad brushstrokes. But that sled in the ice that Orson Welles, I think the greatest of all actors, certainly in the Western canon, he knows it said Rosebud. It's the certainty, right? I tell you a funny thing about Hamlet is that Hamlet's father doesn't say revenge me. He uses the word revenge once. He says remember me. But Hamlet misremembers the words remember me.
It is, I played Hamlet, senior, when my son was playing Hamlet at the Park Theatre 10 years ago. And you're going to make me cry now, because for me the most powerful moment, my son was playing young Hamlet and I'm the ghost of Hamlet, is the scene when the ramparts, I as Hamlet senior, embrace Hamlet, Prince Hamlet, and say the words, it happens twice, remember me, remember me. And what I'm saying to you is, it's clear from everything I read about you and talking today, is that you are going to remember your father. He is central to your life, remembering him. And what I'm really asking you now is, this is how you've coped with this grief. The insomnia you're saying is incidental because it's happened because you haven't have a job. We have to get up at 3 a.m. And what are you going to do now? How are you going to make your life worthy of your children saying to you, when you say to them in years to come, remember me, what will you have done in your life that is worth them remembering about you?
I think 99% of the answer to that question is not going to be professional. So the reverence, respect, adoration and love that I have for their mother is the single most important thing that they'll see. My unconditional love for them and the time I spend with them. It's interesting, men get a bad rap. I don't know about, if it's the Andrew Tate Gen Z generation. My generation of men, we're fantastic dads. I am an incredibly attentive, brilliant, present dad. So that's most of the answer. But there is a bit of the professional example, and I want to build something. And I also want, if I may say, and I'm sure this will get me in trouble, which is all the more reason to say it perhaps, I want to fight decline. I have spent 20 years in my career, which on Wikipedia says a bunch of things, but the experience of it, and I've had a wonderful time. I've loved it. A really good time. I've been paid really well. I've worked with fantastic people. What more do you want? Done something intellectually satisfying and perhaps in occasional instances morally useful as well. I mean, incredible. But it's also been a form of disaster tourism. I've made a habit of joining industries 20 years too late. I joined The Independent in August 2007. It was set up in October 1986. I joined the BBC in 2016. I am bored of missing golden ages and pining for the ages gone. Now, I'm also pragmatic enough to know that one of the reasons I've had a chance to do all the things I've done is because I have been there at the kind of, at this period where there's collapse and decline all around, and it makes it easier to kind of, rise up the ladder. And I've worked incredibly hard, not necessarily harder than the cleaners who clean the toilets at the BBC, but I've worked really hard and conscientiously. But I've been in an atmosphere of decline my entire career. Do you know, Giles, I'm 42. I've never worked anywhere growing or profitable, and I've never worked anywhere that wasn't making redundancies. And I want to experience growth. I'm really worried about the state of this country. I love this country, but I'm really worried about the state of the planet. And to be honest, I spent a lot of time reporting technology, not to get too downbeat for the wonderful listeners of Rosebud, quite worried about our species. And I think that the great mission of the age is to fight decline of our institutions, decline of our minds, decline of our planet, decline of our species. And I want to do that.
And you've got a plan? Is there something exciting you can share?
YouTube. Yes, I do have a plan. I've got a plan. I've got an incredible plan. There is this incredible economy which has grown up, and I've seen it. It's always been there in the distance and just around the corner. I've seen it, but I've had such a good time in newspapers, then at the BBC. And by the way, the BBC is, we could talk about that all day long. The BBC is such a noble, sacred institution. Parts of it are still incredibly important to the life of the nation. But I want to be part of this incredible revolution in media where storytelling, news, information, analysis, thought, conversation has gone from being few people to many to being all to all and wall to wall. And on social media, on YouTube, which I don't think of as social media, YouTube's a video search engine, on blogging platforms like Substack and through streaming platforms, you can, with very low barriers to entry, create incredible communities. And I don't need to tell you that because you've done it with Rosebud. I mean, look, people come here because they know you, they like you, they respect you, and because they know that they're going to get a nice hearing from you. And you've had some enormous days, which is why it's quite humbling to be sat in this chair where, a few weeks ago, John Major was sat here. But what you've done is you've built a community. I'm part of that community. I've listened to dozens of back episodes of this, and I feel a sense of membership. And I'd like to build a community. That's the kind of people side of it. I'd like to build a business, which is an empire of ideas and IP. At the heart of it is going to be a podcast, which has a YouTube channel. I'd like to write, and I'd like to own it.
I want to join your community.
You could join my community.
Before we go, you mentioned, of course, you've interviewed a lot of people. You'll miss out, of course, not being on the Today programme.
Yeah.
Feeling part of something happening, which is very exciting, being part of the news. But you won't really miss it because you've been there. And you aren't exhausted, are you?
I find I hate to be this guy, but I have to say, I feel awkward complaining about it because the producers on the Today programme, who are the most sedulous, brilliant, hard-working, industrious people I've ever met.
What does sedulous mean?
Sedulous means exceptionally committed in your endeavour. So hardworking.
Thank you.
Sedulous. They are incredible. But yes, I tend to do it having not really been to bed because I've got these 4 kids. And listen, it's still a privilege. It's great. But yeah, I take 4 painkillers. I'm often, there's one time last year I remember, and I take this stuff very seriously. But I was interviewing a representative of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, particularly. How can I put this? He's on a front foot, this chap, in defence of Israel's actions in Gaza. And I remember he was the 8:10 slot, which is the premier slot. And 25 minutes before, I felt like I had a woodpecker in my head, and I took 2 codeine. And I thought that's suboptimal. Yeah. And I've probably taken 400 or 500 painkillers over the last few years. So I want to get away from that, and I want to be fit and healthy, and I want to sleep, and I want to rediscover all that. So it's about a new stage in my life.
Why not politics as part of your life?
Because I think that I've thought so hard about this. First of all, I'm genuinely not, which is a useful thing because I work at the BBC, I'm not party political. There are things on which, I think it's useful analytically and intellectually to approach things through the prism of impartiality. I've probably got some views where people think that's really right-wing, or some people think that's really leftish. But I'm not party political. I wouldn't know which party to join. I've never been a member of any political party. That's one problem. The second thing is, it's hell. I mean, it just is hell. Compared to when you were chief whip, we have social media. We have a very, very low level of trust in politics. And I know there's one answer, which is to play the game and work within the system to try and improve it. But my argument against that is, I think that politics, and you know this much better than I would, I think it's 90% luck with timing. If I think of two of the great political figures of my lifetime, Barack Obama and Tony Blair, two of the most consequential world historical figures, extraordinarily talented people, but they were also just in the right place at the right time. Now, they pounced after John Smith died in 1992, 94, Tony Blair pounced, Barack Obama pounced at the end of the Bush years after Iraq and before the financial crisis, and he had the talent and ability to make the most of that opportunity, but they were in the right place at the right time. And I've known a lot of people of my generation from university, a bit older or a bit younger, not been in the right place at the right time, and no one's ever heard of them.
In your conversations with great people, and you've had everybody, I mean, did you nail Bill Gates on his association with Epstein?
One of the things I'm proudest of on the Amol Rajan interviews, they're all there on iPlayer, is that I asked the awkward questions of very powerful people on their patches. You could check out what I asked Richard Branson, and I asked Bill Gates, and I kept at it with Bill Gates. On Epstein, over his affairs, I mean, I didn't fail to ask it. Bill Gates did give me my favourite answer to any question I've ever asked, which is, he had a bit of a reputation in those early years of being a tyrant at Microsoft. And I asked him about this because he used to memorise the number plates of the people that came into work at weekends to make sure that, who was working hard and who wasn't. And I said to him, Bill, if you think about those early days, were you bit of a tyrant? And he really thought about it, Bill Gates. He thinks hard about his answers. And he sort of said, yeah, I probably was, but then everyone who worked for me at the time of their lives and left with tens of millions of dollars. Fair enough.
Yes.
Fair enough. And
you know what? Much more, can you?
And you know what? They wanted to be there. They wanted to be there.
3 more things, and then we're done. You've told us about your moment of sadness, because it must be the death of your father. But a moment of joy, just what comes into your head. And I say a moment of joy. Is it going to be a cricketing moment?
Cricketing and family mixed in one. I walked down the aisle at our wedding in the Guildhall in Cambridge, the first couple ever to get married in the Guildhall. It was a sort of funny sort of pro-feminist thing or something. I can't remember why we did it. But I walked in second after my wife. My wife walked into Handel's music for the Queen of Sheba, is it called? And I came in after, holding my parents' hand. And I was so nervous. And my dad, oblivious to the fact that we were about to walk down the aisle together holding hands, asked me if the trains had run on time that morning from London King's Cross to Cambridge. But we walked down the aisle. I walked down the aisle to the theme tune from Test Match Special, because that song, which is called it's called Soul Limbo by Booker T and the MGs. And I'm spiritually, we've talked a lot about India, but I'm spiritually Caribbean, or specifically Jamaican. I love reggae music. I love Jamaican food. I have a daughter called Jamaica and another called Nesta, after Bob Marley. And in that moment of ecstasy and elevation. Cricket, family, the Caribbean, and all the people I love came together.
Later tonight, I'll be lying in bed thinking, what should I have asked him? What should I ask you that I haven't asked you?
What the true source of happiness is.
What, Amol, is the true source of happiness for you?
Amazing thing is, it's not just for me, it's for everyone.
Ah.
The true source of happiness, I've worked it out, Giles. I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land. The true source of happiness is connection. It's other people. And it takes you a long time in life to work that out. You know, when my dad was in intensive care, I was driving down from North to South London to see him in St George's. And Richard Osman, who is a great podcaster, a great author, TV exec extraordinaire, was doing his Desert Island Discs. And I think Richard Osman is an ornament to public life in Britain. And he said before introducing his final song, he said that he was in his 50s now, he's on his second marriage, he'd worked out what life was about. And he had this phrase where he said, all that rocket fuel that I had as a young man, all that rocket fuel's gone. Sort of, I know what it's about now. And somehow that idea of rocket fuel really resonated with me. You know, my God, I had some rocket fuel, you know, the age of about 18 to 38, till my dad died. And I'm not saying the rocket fuel is gone, because actually my rocket sort of fell a little bit off launch pad, but it's now kind of coming back to centre and it's about to take off again. But I really do know the meaning of life. And a bit like you, I've been very lucky. I've spent time around a huge number of very rich people. I've spent time around a lot of very famous people. I've been on red carpets. I've been to the Oscars. I've been to those swanky parties. Those people are deeply, deeply unhappy. In the end, what makes people happy is their relationships, their bonds, their connections. And I think there are two types of wealth. There's material wealth, which is money, your career, the stuff on Wikipedia. And then there's moral wealth, which is love and your relationships. And it's those that people talk about at your funeral. And so the source of happiness is the relationships and the connections that you have. And if you tend to them and if you give them your all, in the end, you'll be all right.
How is your mum?
She's fantastic. She's WhatsApping me with such vigour and elan from India, where she's having the time of her life.
For a holiday or for
a holiday? No, for a holiday. And she's...
Because it's not easy being a widow, is it?
No, it's not. Well, here's a terrible, true thing to say. But I say it because it's true. And despite it being terrible, it's been a kind of liberation for my mum. You know, my dad was an antisocial guy. I wish more than anything I would give this, you know, I'd give anything for 5 minutes with him. But he was an antisocial kind of guy. And my mum is a pro-social kind of lady. And she's traveling, she's seeing people, she's doing her yoga group. She does, you know, every morning she wakes
she's
up.
She's blossomed.
Oh, she's blossomed. And, you know, I hope she has 25 amazing, or 30, however many years of freedom. And, you know, one of the main reasons that I'm going to work incredibly hard and make this future venture an enormous success is because I want to be able to say to her something I never quite had the means to say to my dad, which is, Mum, you're getting on that plane, and when you do, you're going to turn left.
Well done. That's a lovely wish to have. Do you have in your head, to finish with, any lines by Shakespeare or John Milton that come immediately to mind and that are favourites of yours?
Can I do one of each, please?
Please. I'd love that.
Do you know, I'm so torn, because my dad's favourite poem was Thomas Gray's Elegy, written in the country churchyard, and I've just realised that if I do that, I'm going to cry, and I don't want to do that.
You can give us Gray's Elegy, because it's such a beautiful poem, and then we can dedicate the podcast to the memory of your father, because it's been all about him, really, anyway.
Thomas Gray's Elegy, written in a country churchyard, is the poem that defines my life and defines my father's life, because it's about the nobility of the poor. And Thomas Gray was in a churchyard in Stoke Poges in Buckinghamshire. And there are a number of stanzas which are sort of too beautiful to be able to do without crying. But if you imagine someone in the mid-18th century looking at all these gravestones and saying things like, let not ambition mock their useful toil, their homely joys and destiny obscure, nor grandeur hear with a disdainful smile the short and simple annals of the poor. The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth ever gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. And my favourite stanza, but knowledge to their eyes, her ample page, rich with the spoils of time, never did unroll. Chilled penury repressed their noble rage, and froze the genial current of the soul. And the reason that's my favourite stanza of any poem anywhere ever is because my dad felt that his life was one of chilled penury repressing his noble rage. In other words, he was too poor to be able to study, and therefore he came to London to give his kids a chance that he didn't have.
Well, he gave you a good chance, and you've used it well.
Yeah, and I've still got a fair bit to do.
We're only halfway through. We're halfway through.
Of this podcast?
Now, your story.
Oh, thank you so much.
Here's to the next 42 years
Thank
and
you.
more.
I'm
Thank you, Amol.
Honoured to be here, and a very proud member of your burgeoning and amazing community.
And I'm going to be joining yours.
Thank you so much, James.
Amol Rajan, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Rosebud as much as I did. And I hope you're liking my sweater, my jumper. It's my Rosebud knitwear. Oh, yeah, we like to offer everything on this podcast. Anyway, thanks so much. If you do like them, do spread the word. If you do a like or a follow or leave a comment, it all helps spread the Rosebud joy, because it's a joy for us to make the conversations with these interesting people. And there are lots of them to find on YouTube. So thank you for being part of our YouTube family. I'm Giles Brandreth, the producer is Harriet Jane, and these are edited by my wife's godson, Alec Goodell. This is a family business.